Welcome to Focus on Abilities, a program about issues affecting the lives of people with disabilities. My name is Lex Frieden. I'll be your host for today's program. I'm Senior Vice President at TIRR, the Institute for Rehabilitation and Research. We have a wonderful guest for you today, and I'll introduce him right after we ask this question. And this is a question we'll answer before the end of today's program. What section of the Americans with Disabilities Act relates to employment of people with disabilities? What section of the ADA ensures equal opportunity in employment of people with disabilities? We'll answer that before the end of this segment on today's program. In the meantime, let me introduce our guest today, who is John Evans. John is a corporate consultant from the state of Washington and works with the Vocational Rehabilitation Agency there. John, welcome to Focus on Abilities.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Now, John, your title is corporate consultant. What exactly does that entail?
My role in VR is working directly with employers, corporate officials, to provide them the consultation, technical assistance that they need to employ and retain individuals with disabilities in their workplace.
And how long have you been doing that?
For the last 2 years, I've been in the field of employment and retention of people with disabilities for the last 20 years, but this present position for the last 2 years.
In the position that you're in, I presume you meet with corporate CEOs and line staff trying to promote employment opportunities for people with disabilities. Is that correct?
That is correct. Taking a look at the employer's policies and procedures, consulting with the CEOs on the benefits of hiring people with disabilities and retaining them in the workplace.
What is the best selling point that you find? I mean, do you talk about tax breaks? Do you talk about societal obligation? What approaches do you use?
I think the most effective approach has been to educate the employer on the reality that for every 10 people with disabilities, 3 out of 10 are born and raised with disabilities. But in the workplaces today, more and more individuals who are currently working there at the workplaces are becoming disabled. 7 out of 10 people who become disabled in America today are disabled after the age of 20. So we have an existing workforce that employers have already invested in, and their objective is trying to maintain their present investment. So reasonable accommodation, ADA, Title I of the ADA, that is good employment business. It is smart investment on the part of the employer to retain their existing workforce, particularly as it ages in America.
Now, really, we're talking about job retention and return to work. Return to work becomes an issue only if people are injured. Do most employers have a program that's intended to facilitate that?
Yes, they do. And what we try to get employers to understand that when we talk about the issues of disabilities, we're also including the individuals who are injured. Oftentimes they try to separate that. They will view individual with disabilities as those individuals who are blind or deaf or use wheelchairs or have dyslexia and grew up with their disabling conditions. They're overlooking the reality that the injured worker is just as disabled as the individuals growing up with their disabilities. The back injuries, the head injuries, the aging population where the hearts are harder to pump, and the breathing conditions and the chemical sensitivity disorders and the mental health conditions in America, the post-traumatic stress syndromes. Many of our employees who have already worked and invested in their lives with employers, they're helped becoming disabled by the environment, by the wars, by injury and accident and illness, and it's a misperception, I think, on the part of the employer to think that it's appropriate to separate these categories of injured workers and individuals with disabilities. Look at them as one group of potentially very, very productive employees in the workplace.
Now, John, I suppose employers are also motivated to concentrate on that population in order to avoid the cost of long-term disability insurance. Have you heard that from employers, that they're motivated by the need not only to retain workers, but also to avoid high premiums on their insurance policies?
That is correct. They have found that it's much more productive to keep employees working, and that reasonable accommodation in employment really is not that expensive, and that our society has grown tremendously in assistive technology and adjusting the workplace and finding other methods by which the essential functions of a job can be completed. They're realizing that by retaining that workforce, their insurances dropped, and that is truly a myth that just because an individual is disabled, they can't be productive on the job.
Now, our audience will have observed that we are working here with the assistance of an interpreter, Will Gorham from Little Rock, and that is because you yourself have a disability. Can you describe for our viewers what your personal experience with disability has been?
It's hereditary in my family. I was born with a 75 decibel loss in both ears. I've got two brothers in my family that are deaf. We attended the mainstream programs at a young age and then transitioned to the State School for the Deaf in Vancouver. After completing the State School for the Deaf, I immediately graduated with an SSI check in one hand and a suitcase in the other, and that's all I had to my name. But thank Lord that they had a VR system, and that I was able to transition directly from the school into the VR system, who provided me the education and the training and the opportunity for a future. And I was a part of that system, went to Gallaudet University, graduated from a public college, Seattle University, in public administration and human resource development, and soon after graduation went to work for the vocational rehabilitation programs, where I have been working there for approximately 20 years.
Now, you said VR. VR means vocational rehabilitation.
Vocational rehabilitation.
That's a program that's available in every state for people who have employment goals and who have disabilities.
That is correct. I've got some statistics here I'd like to be able to share with you, and I'll just some of the recent statistics that we have in the nation. As you well know, we have approximately 54 million people with severe disabilities in America. Of that, 17 million individuals of that population could be served by vocational rehabilitation. We have only resources in the United States to serve 1.5 million of that population of 17 million. We have 39 states that are presently in what is known as order of selection. The reality of our system is we do not have the resources to serve the larger population of individuals with disabilities who truly want to go to work. We are currently investing $200 billion in Social Security system to keep individuals with disabilities dependent upon this system and living below the poverty line. A VR program has 1.4 million active cases, served by 11,000 vocational rehabilitation counselors around the United States in each state and territories. We currently have a $2.7 billion budget. That is all. We have our successes, though. We have 217,557 employment outcomes from our system. In the last year, we have 91% of that were severely disabled, who entered into competitive employment at 93.9%. It is a very successful program. The unfortunate part of the program is that we need to triple the resources. We need Congress to allocate the funds necessary to serve the greater population of people with disabilities that are on Social Security who truly want to get off of that system and go into competitive employment.
John, you said that 39 states have a so-called order of selection. Can you describe what that means?
Demand for the program far exceeds the supply of dollars and resources. With that in mind, we don't have enough counselors, we don't have enough money and funding to provide those services. So it's a first come, first served program. And with that in mind, the question is, who should receive the most amount of support? Should it be the most severely disabled or individuals with a minor disability? Order of selection is a system set up to ensure that if individuals with disabilities with the most severe disabilities come into our system, they will receive services first. They will receive the priority of services. And if we can serve the most severely disabled first, then we'll go down to the second priority of having a disability, but not the most severely disabled, but severely disabled. And then, of course, there is the disabled. But what we have tried to do in our system is to prioritize our programs so that it's focused on those individuals who have the most challenges, the most severe disabilities, the most functional limitations, who truly need the public vocational rehabilitation program to receive independence and employment in our society.
Now, working in Washington, you probably come in touch with the companies we've all heard of, Microsoft, Boeing, other huge West Coast companies. Has your experience with those companies been as good as one might hope?
Absolutely. Microsoft, Nordstrom, Starbucks, Washington Mutual Bank, Cellular One, Albertsons, Safeway. These companies are truly committed to making a difference. They have stepped up to the plate and they have said, we will be there to do what we can, not only to support your programs and to testify before Congress on the value of your programs. They have stepped up to the plate to hire individuals with disabilities. Safeway, for example, in the state of Washington alone, has hired 93 individuals with disabilities in the last few years. Yeah. That includes individuals who are deaf, individuals who are deaf or blind, individuals who are blind or using wheelchairs, and so developmental disabilities. It is a wonderful, wonderful employer who's truly making an impact in the Washington state.
I want to talk more about where we need to go with employers, and particularly mid-sized and smaller employers. Before we do, however, we'll take a break. And I want all of you to stay tuned. We're here with John Evans, our guest on Focus on Abilities. I'm Lex Frieden. We'll be right back.
Seatbelts save lives. That's why law enforcement officers are on Texas streets and highways, stepping up their effort to look for people who aren't buckled up. If you're not wearing your seatbelt, you're getting a ticket. No excuses, no exceptions.
Welcome back to Focus on Abilities. I'm Lex Frieden, your host. We're here today with the corporate consultant, John Evans, from the Washington State Vocational Rehabilitation Agency. And we're talking about employment of people with disabilities, what companies can do to improve their workforce by hiring people with disabilities. John, you've named a number of large companies that you would regard, I think, as good models of employment practices related to people with disabilities. But we do have a huge gap with some companies who fail to see the benefits of employment of people with disabilities. I make that assumption on the basis of the large number of people with disabilities who are trained and skilled and looking for work. Where is the gap?
Identification of essential functions is a key criteria of the ADA. Our employers are just now focusing on the importance of analyzing function versus method, recognizing that it is essential function is a bottom line and it needs to get done. But there are several methods to assistive technologies, changes, adjustments, modifications in the workplace that would enable job performance of individuals with disabilities. So one of the challenges with our corporations is getting them to understand that you can't pad, if you will, the job description with methodologies that are used to screen out rather than to recruit individuals with disabilities. So another area is focusing on their policies and procedures, encouraging the employers to support empowerment, self-determination, posting of notification, encouraging individuals who are applicants for jobs or employees who are currently in their jobs to see the value of requesting accommodations, the procedures that are needed to follow so that they can receive those accommodations that will enable their job performance. We are encouraging these companies to embrace reasonable accommodation in the workplace, not to turn the whole concept of reasonable accommodation into a negative term that is feared by others. It is a positive term that benefits not only individuals who are seeking employment, but more importantly, individuals who are presently working in their workplaces.
Now, John, I can understand a large employer might have the resources and the capacity to hire specialists in human resources who can help them address the needs of employees with disabilities. But a small company, a small employer with 12 or 14 employees, let's say, they don't have the resources necessary to analyze their job descriptions and go to take a lot of measures to ensure that every employee's needs are addressed. It's more difficult for them. Where do they get help?
Vocational rehabilitation program counselors are a wonderful resource. Our one-stop centers, our work source centers in the nation are currently developing positions in their organizations that are focused on helping employers understand the issues and the benefits and the tax credits of hiring individuals with disabilities. There are consultants like myself who are free at no cost to be able to go out to these businesses, provide them the technical assistance. We have the Job Accommodation Network. We have a number of national organizations that are focused on the employer's needs. It's important to log on to USA websites, log on to the Department of Labor websites, log on to the EEOC, find out those resources that the nation's government has provided and made available to the small businesses as well as to the larger corporations.
One entry point for information that I'm aware of that we should mention for our viewers is the ADA Technical Assistance Centers. And anybody in the country can call 800-949-4232 to get information about ADA, including employment. And while those centers may not be equipped to answer every question about employment, they can certainly provide good referrals to some of the agencies that you mentioned as appropriate. So I do agree with you that there are many resources there for employers if they would reach out and begin to do some more research, recognizing the value of disabled employees in the workplace. Now, if you were speaking to a group of people with disabilities who were frustrated because they had been from one place to the next trying to get a job, no jobs available, they might assume that it was because of their disability, or maybe they just assumed it was hard to find a job these days. What would you say to encourage prospective employees with disabilities?
Focus on your abilities. Prepare a resume that shows you have the skills, the abilities, and the knowledge to perform the job. Focus on what those essential functions are. You need to know what the bottom line of a position it requires. And if you feel that the functional limitations of your disability will prevent job performance, be ready in advance to demonstrate and explain to that employer how you are going to complete a job with and or without accommodations. Be ready to sell yourself and sell your abilities and be able to convince that employer that the disability in itself is not going to prevent job performance. The burden is on the individual with a disability to be prepared to identify accommodations that are not going to cause an undue hardship on that employer, and to identify accommodations that will enable job performance, not take that away.
I can support what you've said, speaking as an employer, and I have interviewed a number of people for jobs. I must say that I was very impressed with those people who came to the interview knowing something about the job they were applying for. Most people come to interviews and they have with them a job announcement. A few people will do some research about our company, about our positions, about the people who we worked with in the past. And those people actually wind up at the head of the line. Are there other kinds of issues that people with disabilities should be prepared to address once they get on the job?
Bottom line, people with disabilities have rights and they have responsibilities. Employers and the covered entity has rights and they also have responsibilities. Many people with disabilities are willing to say, I have rights. And they overlook the reality of this world that they also have responsibilities. Learn what those responsibilities are under the ADA. Yes, we have rights, but so does the employer. It's an even playing field. And it's when you don't know your rights as an employer, the law could work against you. And when you don't implement your responsibilities as an employer, the law could work against you. And the same is said to individuals with disabilities. Know your rights, know your responsibilities. Maintain an even playing field in the world of work.
Now, in addition to the ADA technical assistance centers that I mentioned, where can people with disabilities get information about their rights?
The DIPTAC centers, the Disability Assistance Technical Assistance Centers that are around the United States, wonderful, wonderful programs. Let individuals with disabilities contact those centers to provide and receive the information they need to know their rights and responsibilities. Log on to the Department of Justice website, log on to the EEOC, log on to the Office of Department of Education, log on to the Department of Labor, click in disability, and you will find a wealth of information on rights and responsibilities of employees and applicants with disabilities.
John, you've made reference on a couple of occasions to the internet and the great resource that we have in terms of information there. From the standpoint of a person with a disability, of a person with a hearing impairment, how accessible do you feel the internet is now for people with disabilities?
For individuals who are deaf, it's wonderful because we can read. Log on, video relay, emails. It's a great resource for deaf people. For individuals who are blind, it's substantially improved. There are challenges there for individuals who are blind. The systems with the that utilize the JAWS and the Dolphin programs, there are some challenges with that. There are several corporations who have found that their software and their infrastructure does not support those programs. So one of the challenges that we have in the blind community is resolving that, coming up with the technology needed to be compatible with the employer's work environment, just as it should be compatible with individuals who are blind and the software that they use. But for people who are deaf, it's a great resource on the internet.
But even for deaf people, I've recently seen some web pages that open with an audio description of the site, which, I mean, you may think it's a great site, but if you knew what they were saying, you may have a different opinion. I don't know.
That is true, and I recently had the opportunity to work with Microsoft and their software developers, and they have taken on that challenge of making sure that their products and their services that they are producing around the world are accessible not only to individuals who are deaf, but accessible to individuals with manual dexterity challenges, individuals with dyslexia, individuals who are visually impaired as well.
I'd like for you to see our new baseball stadium, Minute Maid Park in Houston, at some point. When the new stadium was established, a number of us in the disability community met with the architects and planners and talked about disability access issues. And of course, the architects thought their greatest challenge would be for those of us in wheelchairs being able to see good line of sight to the field. But we raised the issue of persons with hearing impairments and deaf persons not being able to hear all the play-by-play descriptions and announcements that ordinarily occur in the ballpark and make up part of the ambiance and the environment. And what we have done in that ballpark is to put up 2 large signs that are electronic and that transcribe virtually everything that goes over the loudspeaker system, so that persons who are deaf or hard of hearing will know what's being said. And I think that's a real breakthrough. I'm looking forward to the point at which the airlines begin to initiate those kinds of services, because I suppose you as a deaf person traveling might not even be aware if there were an emergency because the announcement is made over the loudspeaker. Are you sometimes frustrated by that?
Very much so. In fact, I just recently had an interesting experience, if I may share with your audience. I had a flight arrangement to go from Seattle to Houston to Austin, and I was flying out red eye. And because of my deafness and because of the noise on the airplane, there was no way I was able to hear any adjustments to that flight. It just so happens that the plane landed, I thought it was Houston. And because the schedule said you're going to fly into Houston, you're not going to get off, but then you're going to fly into Austin. So when it flew, and when the plane landed, I'm thinking it's Houston. And then it takes off. It lands again. I'm thinking it's Austin. So I get off the airplane and I go down to my baggage. I'm looking for my baggage. My baggage isn't there. People are all gone. I'm thinking, what happened to my baggage? So I go up to the counter. I'm asking them. I says, where is my baggage? They're going, well, let me see your ticket, sir. I gave him my ticket. He looks at it and says, sir, you're in Houston. I'm going, what do you mean I'm in Houston? The plane landed. Where did they land? Oh, they landed for a fuel stop. They landed for a fuel stop. Well, yeah, I'm in Houston. I'm supposed to be in Austin. Well, I'm sorry, sir. We're going to need to put you in a hotel. Well, it just so happens the next day I was due in Austin 10 in the morning for a keynote presentation, and with no flight out until 9 o'clock the next morning. So you're right. It can be very, very frustrating. But at the same time, it's important to say our nation is making progress. We are making substantial progress. We have a long way to go. Don't get me wrong with that. But we are still making progress, and we need to recognize that and commend our nation's leaders for that progress.
John, we're going to conclude the program now, but before we do, did you make it to Austin in time for your presentation at 10 o'clock?
Yes, sir, I did.
Very well. Thanks a lot for being our guest on Focus on Abilities. I want to thank all of you for watching today. John Evans has been our guest. I'm Lex Frieden. Please join us next time for more Focus on Abilities.